The Senate will come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Bridges.
Here.
Buckner. Coleman. Cook. Quorum.
Good morning.
Danielson. Excuse, right.
Excused.
Donovan. Thenberg. Fields. Gardner. Janal. Gonzalez. Hanson. Heisey. Holbert. Hawkes Lewis. Kirkmeyer. Colker. Lee. Liston. Lundeen. Marino.
Here.
Patterson. Priola. Rankin. Rodriguez. Scott. I thought Scott was up there. Scott. I thought Scott was up there, but now he's gone. I called Scott twice. I thought he was up there. His name was now he's gone.
He wasn't approved.
Oh, I thought his name was up there earlier.
It was, but he wasn't approved.
You're doing good.
I know he's. Sorry.
Okay. I'm just waiting now.
Sir Holbert? Thank you. I sent him everything this morning. He was up there earlier. As soon as we get the report, we're going to do this one. So we are going to do this. So. Ready to go on that.
He thought he was logged in.
Can we just excuse him now? Yeah.
The Senate will stand in a brief recess.
Ray, does it look like you're logged in? that we can't. I've got to be a no.
Oh, geez.
Senate. The Senate will come back to order. Will the clerk please continue the roll call?
Scott.
Here.
Simpson. Smallwood. Sonnenberg. Story. Winter. Woodward. Senzinger. Mr. President.
Here. The morning roll call is 34 present, 0 absent, 1 excused. We have a quorum. Would the good senator from Denver please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, please join me in saying the pledge. I pledge allegiance
Approval of the journal. Senator Hawkins-Lewis.
Good morning, Mr. President. Thank you. And I move the reading of the Journal of Thursday, May 6, 2021 be dispensed with and the journal be approved as corrected by the Secretary.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Senate Services.
May 7th, correctly printed Senate Bill 265, correctly engrossed Senate Bill 27108, 175, correctly revised HJR 1007, correctly enrolled Senate Bill 155, 188.
Committee reports.
May 6th, Mr. President, the Committee on Education has had in consideration that a hearing on the following appointments recommends the appointments be placed in the consent calendar and confirmed. Members of Private Occupational School Board for a term expiring July 1st, 2022. Jessica Shea Houts of Federal Heights, Colorado, serves as representative of the general public who is an owner or operator of business within Colorado. Employees, students are enrolled in the schools that are subject to admission by the Private Occupational School Division, occasioned by the resignation of Christopher Rice of Lifton, Colorado, appointed effective July 1st, 2020 for a term expiring July 1st, 2024. Barbara A. Kearns of Thornton, Colorado, serves as representative of Private Occupational School, reappointed. May 6th, Mr. President, the Committee on Education has had in consideration had a hearing on the following appointments. Recommends appointments be placed in the consent calendar and confirmed. Member of the Colorado Education and Cultural Facilities Authority Board of Directors for a term expiring June 30th, 2021. Morris Price of Denver, Colorado, and a Democrat and occasioned by the resignation of William Thomas Pound of Castle Pines, Colorado, appointed. May 6th, Committee on Education. After consideration of the merits, the committee recommends the following House Bill 1259 be referred to committee of the whole. Favorable recommendation placed on the consent calendar. May 6th, Committee on Education. After consideration of the merits, the committee recommends the following House Bill 1221 be referred to the committee of the whole. Favorable recommendation placed on the consent calendar. May 6th, Committee on Education. After consideration of the merits, the committee recommends the following House Bill 1200 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. May 6th, Committee on Judiciary. After consideration of the merits, the committee recommends the following Senate Bill 146 be amended as follows. So amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. May 6th, Committee on Judiciary. After consideration of the merits, the committee recommends the following House Bill 1211 be amended as follows. So amended be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. March 6th, Committee on Judiciary. After consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following Senate Bill 176 be amended as follows. So amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. March 6th, Committee on Agricultural and Natural Resources. After consideration of the merits, the committee recommends the following Senate Bill 249 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations.
Members, the Senate Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee met yesterday to hear Senate Bill 21249 on its merits, and before they adjourned, the bill was erroneously referred to the Senate Appropriations Committee instead of Senate Finance Committee as required by the 2021 routing memo that was produced and distributed on January 13, 2021. According to Mason's Manual on Legislative Procedure, Section 328, parenthesis A, the President can refer a bill when it is referred to by a committee in error with unanimous consent with the body. Is there any objection to the correction of the error referred to in Senate Bill 21249 from Senate Appropriations to Senate Finance? Is there any discussion? Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, sitting in Ag yesterday, because of our esteemed colleague, we tried to make his path easier. and not send friends to finance. But I understand, with no disrespect to the president and his routing memo, we probably gave too much favor to the majority leader. With that, I am asking you to support this so we actually follow the process. I am not going to admit that the Agriculture Committee erred. What I am going to tell you is the Agriculture Committee tried to help our majority leader in violation of the routing sheet. I'm asking for your support for this. It does indeed take unanimous support, so please be supportive.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to the good senator from Sterling for being in support of my bill being double assigned, because that's what I'm asking you to do here. Triple assigned, actually, you're right, triple assigned. But yes, this was supposed to go to finance. It was erroneously sent to appropriations. I had nothing to do with that motion. But this is what happens when the all-powerful chair of the Agriculture Committee steps out and is unavailable. Mistakes happen. And so never again will we allow you to miss committee. But thank you, Mr. President, for making this unusual motion, but urge unanimous consent to do this and make it right.
Seeing no objection, Senate Bill 21-249 is referred to Senate Finance. Introduction of resolutions. Will the clerk please read the title of the Senate Joint Resolution 021?
Senate Joint Resolution 21 by Senator Danielson and Representative Will concerning the General Assembly's support of the state of Colorado's efforts to preserve the state's flora and fauna throughout the protection of wildlife habitat connectivity.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that Senate Joint Resolution 21 lay over until Monday, May 10th.
You have heard the motion. Seeing no objection, Senate Joint Resolution 021 will lay over one day under the rules until Monday, May 10th, 2021. Third reading of bills, final passage. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1164?
House Bill 1164 by Representative Escar and Garnett and Senators Zenzinger and Fenberg concerning reductions of property tax credits applied to the school district's total program mill levies for purposes of funding the Public Schools Finance Act of 1994.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Bill 1164 lay over until May 12th.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and House Bill 1164 will lay over until 5/12/21 and retain its place on the calendar. Will the clerk please read the title of Senate Bill 027? Excuse me, will the clerk please read the title of Senate Bill 108?
Senate Bill 108 by Senators Story and Representative Burnett and Cutter concerning gas pipeline safety and the connections thereof, increasing and clarifying the rulemaking and enforcement authority of the Public Utilities Commission.
Senator Story.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 108 on third reading and final passage.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the passage of Senate Bill 108 on third reading and final passage. Are there any no votes? Senator Quorum, Scott, Mr. Minority Leader, Senators Cook, Woodward, Kirkmeyer, Sonnenberg, Heisey, Lundeen, Gardner, Liston, Simpson, Rankin, Priola, Smallwood. With 19 aye votes, 15 no votes, 0 absent, 1 excuse, Senate Bill 108 is passed. Co-sponsors. Senators Moreno, Winter, Pedersen, will the clerk please read the title of Senate Bill 027?
Senate Bill 27 by Senator Pedersen and Danielson and Representative Gonzalez, Gutierrez, and Tipper concerning emergency supplies for Colorado babies and families and connections therewith, providing diapering essentials through diapering distribution centers and making an appropriation.
Senator Pedersen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 27 on third reading and final passage.
Is there any discussion? Senator Smallwood.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Was hoping to rise in support of Senate Bill 27, hoping that there was going to be a third reading amendment that would indeed ensure that the state taxpayer money is going to purchase diapers, creams, and wipes for our citizens that are actually in need versus any citizen regardless of their wealth level. So still hoping to be a yes vote on this and hoping that we just missed the third reading amendment.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion before the body is the passage of Senate Bill 027 on third reading and final passage. Are there any no votes? Senators Sonnenberg, Cook, Liston, Gardner, Simpson, Coram, Scott, Heisey, Kirkmeyer, Rankin, Lundin, Woodward, Priola, the Minority Leader, and Senator Smallwood. With 19 ayes, 15 no votes, 0 absent, and 1 excuse, Senate Bill 027 is passed. Co-sponsors. Senators Winter, Lee, Moreno, Bridges, Gonzalez, Story, Buckner, the Majority Leader. Kolker, Hansen, Rodriguez, Hawkes Lewis. Please add the President. The Senate will be in a recess.
Third reading amendment? Here we go.
Yeah, having voted on the surveillance side.
Yeah. I want to be yes on the diaper bill. Amendment?
Senator Gonzalez, you have a minute? What's the House holding up on 77? You know?
I thought they did it.
In the journal. Can we do 77 today? The House still has an act.
I mean, if something changes, I'll let you know.
Okay.
But, I mean,
The Senate will come back to order. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move a call of the Senate.
A call of the Senate has been moved and properly sustained. Will the sergeants please close all the doors, allow no senators to leave, and return all those who are absent back to the chamber? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Bridges.
Panetta.
Hold on. Buckner. Coleman. Cook. Coram. Danielson. Donovan. Oh, it's messing me up. Finberg. Fields. Gardner. Janal. Why won't this work? Gonzalez. Hanson. I know we're missing. Heisey. Holbert. Hawkes Lewis. Kirkmeyer. So I have a little flip on here. Donovan's here and Corum's not, just so you know. And every time I try to fix it, it messes me up, so I'm just going to leave them for now, and I just know that. Okay?
Absent.
Colker.
Senator Kirkmeyer will be recorded as present.
Okay. It just doesn't work for me. Kirkmeyer, present. Lee. Liston. Lundin. Moreno.
Here.
Pedersen. Priola. Rankin. Rodriguez. Scott.
Here.
Simpson. Smallwood. Sonnenberg. Story. Winter. Woodward. Senzinger. So everyone's here but quorum.
So everyone's here except for quorum.
That's wrong. Everyone's here but quorum.
Did quorum say here?
Yes. Quorum.
Here.
Mr. President.
Here. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the call be raised.
The motion is to raise the call. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the call is raised. Will the clerk please add Senator Danielson to the roll call? Third reading of bill's final passage. Will the clerk please read the title of Senate Bill 175?
Senate Bill 175 by Senators Hawkins, Lewis, and Gonzalez, and Representative Caraveo and Kennedy, concerning the Colorado Prescription Drug Affordability Review Board, in connection therewith directing the board to review the affordability of certain drugs and establish upper payment limits for certain drugs, prohibiting certain entities from purchasing or reimbursing for any drug for distribution in the state at an amount that exceeds the upper payment limit established for the prescription drug, establishing penalties for, and making an appropriation.
Senator Gonzalez.
Gracias, Presidente. We move Senate Bill 175 on third reading and final passage and ask for an aye vote.
Is there any discussion? Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. So I feel like we got in the weeds really, really quickly on this bill yesterday, and probably didn't spend as much time as we should have at the 30,000-foot level. I appreciate, on a personal note, I appreciate the conversations that we've had on both sides of the aisle outside of the well, outside of this chamber. Because like so many things in healthcare, this is a nonpartisan issue. This is not Republicans versus Democrats. This isn't conservatives versus progressives. This isn't anything like that. This is, we know that our citizens pay a ton of money for healthcare in this country. And those of us who are serious about healthcare policy want to do whatever we can to help drive that down. All of us. And I'm glad to try to pound my chest and show the litany of bills that I've been the prime sponsor on in the last 5 years that aim to do exactly that. But you all have access to the internet. You can look that up yourself. Although I'd love to pound my chest about it. And would do so if given the proper opportunity. But what this bill does, the way I see it, has only two potential outcomes. And it's either going to work the way the proponents say that it's going to, which you've heard about a number of different schemes here at this podium. It's either going to work or it's not going to work. And I'd like to walk you through briefly in the 8.5 minutes that I have here. What does this look like if it works? And what does this look like if it doesn't work? So let's start with if it works. If you listen to everything the proponents have to say about how this can and should work. Number one, you all vote for it here today. Goes to the House, everybody votes for it. Then we're going to have a big bill signing. So everybody's going to go down to the first floor. The bill sponsors will be there, and the governor will be there at a podium with 3 cell phones, and you'll have the director of HICPUF, and you'll have the commissioner of insurance, and a bunch of advocates all say, this is fantastic, we passed this, we're finally going to get prescription drugs, the cost of prescription drugs under control in our state, and everybody will clap. And then we will have created a board. When I say we, I don't mean we, like the electeds. The governor will create a board. And that board will have the authority to set an upper price limit on prescription drugs. And if you listen to the proponents, here's what will happen when that upper price limit is created. This is the most important thing you'll hear about this bill all day. What is supposed to happen is that drug manufacturers will be so motivated by this bill and the fact that the citizens of the state of Colorado are not going to allow their drug to come into our state at the price that they want, right? The price that they're charging today. It's saying that you'll have to drop your price if you want your drug to come into our state. And the drug manufacturers will all say, oh my gosh, we've got to drop the price of this drug. I mean, Colorado has, after all, 1.67% of the US population. We have to do this. So they will, knowing full well that in doing so, they're establishing a precedent across the country where now every state is going to demand that they drive down the price of the drug. The drug companies the drug manufacturers are that stupid that that's what they're going to do. Our 1.67% of the population is so critical to them that they are going to be willing to throw their entire business model outside the window in order to make sure that this happens for the citizens of Colorado. Okay, that's what you're led to believe here, that that's what's going to happen. Going to drive down the price of drugs. So now we're going to have less expensive drugs in Colorado's pharmacies because we muscled Pfizer and Merck. Okay. Good for us, good negotiation, right? So now, what you've also heard is this is going to now save our citizens money on prescription drugs because we've done this and we've driven down the price of prescription drugs. So obviously all of us as patients now are going to see less expensive prescription drugs, right? And colleagues, this is where I would say, no, this isn't what's going to happen at all. We heard in testimony, and you saw an amendment yesterday that says that state agencies, where generally speaking your taxpayer monies are spent, aren't going to be subject to this. Medicaid is already getting a better deal than what the PDAP will give you. That's what we heard in committee. And we also heard in committee, well, this is going to save a fortune in what we spend in corrections. And you heard yesterday here on the floor that actually that's not going to happen at all. Our inmates are not going to experience the savings here. The taxpayer is not going to receive this. What I'm arguing, what I'm telling you is going to happen is that those state agencies aren't going to save a nickel when this happens. Price of drugs are coming down, but those agencies aren't going to be the beneficiaries of that. So you would say, listening to the proponents, well then, it's got to be our patients, right? The people showing up at the pharmacy with high deductible health plans, they're finally going to see the cost of their drugs dropped. And colleagues, what I'll tell you, I don't know a lot about a lot, but I do know about health plans. It's literally my only marketable skill. 28 years of doing the exact same thing from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed. Health plans, by and large, have co-payments for prescription drugs, and they're fixed. It doesn't matter what the cost of the underlying drug is. If you've got a $20 brand name copay, or what do we have here at the state? Who's taking a look at their card? 30 bucks? 20 bucks, 30 bucks, 50 bucks, 10 bucks? Whatever it is, colleagues, I promise you, that is going to be the same regardless of the price of the underlying prescription. You as patients going to get your prescriptions filled are going to pay the exact same amount of money. What you might have also heard is, well, that's true for those of us fortunate to have a plan with copays, but not everybody has that. And that's absolutely true. In fact, I was so moved by that argument yesterday that I went on to Connect for Health last night, and I pulled the plan design descriptions of all 70 plans sold at Connect for Health for my zip code, all 70. And I went through the plan design description of each one. Colleagues, guess how many of those plans have a co-insurance amount for prescription drugs without the deductible needing to be met first out of 70 plans? One plan, and it's not for generics, and it's not for brand name, it's for specialty only. 70 plans, one that has co-insurance only that I found, without the deductible needing to be met first. There are lots of plans, tons of plans, including one sold here at the state of Colorado, that have a coinsurance amount, but guess what? You need to meet your deductible first. And if you look at the top 30, the cheapest 30 plans of those 70 sold on the exchange, 25 of the 30 have a deductible over $6,000, colleagues. This is what people on our exchange are facing. A $6,000 deductible but that you have to pay as the patient before you get into this coinsurance amount. So if we have this board that lowers the cost of prescription drugs, let's say, let's be hyperbolic, since we're all friends. Drugs that cost $400,000, which there are some, that we're able to knock the price down to $100,000. Guess what? Patients in our state are still either going to have a copay or they're going to have at least a $6,000 deductible to meet on their way to their out-of-pocket max of $8,550. And go through the exchange, look at the out-of-pocket maximums, $8,550, $8,550, $8,550, $8,550, $8,550, the whole way down. Colleagues, senators, our citizens who buy on the exchange are going to pay $8,500. Most of the plans that are sold in the state of Colorado today are going to have a copay if you're not buying on the exchange. If it's not a $400,000 drug, let's say it's a $50,000 drug. I don't care, pick the number that you think is important enough for this new board to say, we're actually going to target this drug. Are they going to target drugs that cost $1,000? Colleagues, no way. Why would they do that? What a useless board that would be if they're only targeting drugs that cost $1,000 in the first place. They've got to be targeting drugs that are expensive, right? That's why we want to do this. So if you take a $50,000 drug and lower the cost to $30,000, guess how much our patients are going to pay? The exact same amount. Their copay or their deductible. But Senator from Douglas County, you just said that best case scenario, drugs are going to be cheaper in our state now. Who's going to pay less? If the taxpayer's not going to pay less and the patient's not going to pay less, where's the cost savings going? To the insurance companies. Hopefully they pass that savings on at some time, some way, across the entire spectrum of all of their health plans, to where maybe now, because prescription drugs on average, at least in my book of business, are about 17% of the total spend.
Would the good senator from Douglas County like to be extended to your next 10 minutes?
2 more or 1 more?
10 more minutes. It's extended to the
Thank
good
you,
senator.
Mr. President. So what I'm trying to make sure that you know, when you talk to your constituents and they want to know why their cost of prescription drugs is still exactly the same, that you'll at least be able to explain the arithmetic behind it. And you probably could have before. I'm not minimizing your understanding of this topic or anything like that. Sure, you could before. Now, the reason why I oppose this bill as it sits right now, but will support it and will vote yes with the proper amendment, is that here's what happens if it doesn't work. And if you're going to vote yes, this part might be more important for you, because I fear that this is going to happen. We pass this out of the Senate, goes to the House, we pass it, all meet down on the first floor, bill sponsors are there, Director of HICPUF's there, Commissioner of Insurance is there, Governor has 3 cell phones. They talk about how great this is, how it's going to save everybody money, everybody claps, and the board creates this upper payment limit, which they better, because that's what we tasked them to do. They're going to create this upper payment limit, and the drug companies are going to say, you know what, Colorado, with your 1.67% of the US population, we don't really care that much that we can't send our drugs to your state. And we're certainly smart enough not to set a precedent to where states like California, New York, Florida, Texas, Illinois think they can get away with something like this. So guess what, smart people in Colorado? We're not selling you the drug for that little. And if they're not selling us the drug for that little, the pharmacies can't buy them for that little. And so this is where we got into the weeds quickly yesterday, all of a sudden clamoring to say, okay, we know that there's a potential that there's going to be patients out there, sick kids, sick spouses, sick senators, who are going to need these prescription drugs, want these prescription drugs, and guess what, colleagues? They don't want to drive to Wyoming or Kansas or New Mexico to get them. They would like to get them here in Colorado, where they live. So right away yesterday, we're like, okay, let's build an appeals process. And sadly, it didn't feel like I got a lot of support on the other side of the aisle for making sure that if we're going to put these patients through these gymnastics, that we guarantee that they get their medication within a reasonable period of time. Colleagues, that is my fear in a nutshell, is that you're going to get calls from your constituents saying, you built this board, they set the UPL, my kid can't get his medication, I filed the appeal, it took 3 days for them to respond. Are weekends included or included? I don't know. It's not clear in the statute. And now it's another week or two, my kid's dying. What did you do? How is this helping me? Lord knows the cost of my prescriptions didn't go down. So what I'm asking colleagues is that we fix the one piece of this that we can. You all were elected, just like me. Some of you on bigger margins, Senator from Denver, some of you on smaller margins. We're all elected. Okay? Shouldn't we be the ones that when the board comes, like every other board, commission, department, when they come, shouldn't we be the ones that make the decision as to what medications are on that UPL and what aren't? If you've worked with me long enough, you'll know there are plenty of meds that when I see on that list what they're charging, whether or not they're life-threatening, and whether we can get something cheaper, I'm going to be the first one to say, yep, that should be the law in our state. But an unelected board that you don't control, who knows who the governor is going to be 6 years from now, 16 years from now, 26 years from now? We're the electeds. We get to decide what's best for our constituents, not a board. The board should come to us and and recommend to us, this is where we can get the most bang for the patients in our state. This is where we can lower health insurance premiums. Because colleagues, that's all this bill does. This bill helps the insurance companies. It doesn't help your patients. Now, I think that if you help the insurance companies, eventually you'll help all the patients. That's why I'm about ready to vote yes on this bill. Board comes to us, not the other way around. They're going to make a recommendation to us. We can choose to act on it or not act on it. I know we'll all be. So with that, Mr. President, I would ask for permission to run a third reading amendment that does exactly that. Everywhere in this bill, colleagues, where it says the board's going to establish a UPL, we're going to replace that word with recommend a UPL. And the board will do everything as they say, and we will decide what is best for our constituents. And I hope you'll support me on that.
The question before the body is to grant permission to the good senator from Douglas County to offer a third reading amendment. To offer a third reading amendment, a roll call vote has been requested on permission to offer a third reading amendment. Will the clerk please poll the senators?
Bridges.
No.
Buckner. Buckner, no. Coleman. Coleman, no. Cook. Cook, aye. Quorum.
Aye.
Quorum, aye. Danielson. Danielson, no. Donovan. Donovan, no. Fenberg. Fenberg, no. Fields. Fields, no. Gardner. Gardner, aye. Janal. Janal, aye. Gonzalez. Gonzalez, no. Hanson. Hanson, no. Heisey. Heisey, aye. Holbert. Holbert, aye. Hawkes Lewis. Hawkes Lewis, no. Kirkmeyer. Kirkmeyer, aye. Colker. Colker, no. Lee. Lee, no. Liston. Liston, aye. Lundin. Lundin, aye. Moreno.
No.
Moreno, no. Pedersen. Pedersen, no. Priola. Priola, aye. Rankin. Rankin, aye. Rodriguez. Rodriguez, no. Scott.
Aye.
Scott, aye. Simpson. Simpson, aye. Smallwood. Smallwood, aye. Sonnenberg. Sonnenberg, aye. Story. Story, no. Winter. Winter, no. Woodward. Woodward, aye. Senzinger. Zenzinger, aye. Mr. President.
No.
Mr. President, no.
That was the one I needed.
With 17 aye votes, 18 no votes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, permission is not granted. Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, kind of, Mr. President. Colleagues, I'll wrap up. I feel good about where we're leaving this right now. I really do. Part of this could be a really good step. You'll notice this is Senate Bill 175, not House Bill 1175. This is Senate Bill 175. I'm confident that you all are as concerned as I am that this is not for show. This is not to put something on Twitter or Facebook that says we did something. I'm confident that you actually want to do something and make healthcare better for citizens in our state. So, am I disappointed that I can't run this amendment? Sure. But I also feel like you're able to comfortably go to your constituents, talk to them about best case scenario, talk to them about worst case scenario, and being prepared that if the worst case scenario really happens, and it's not so much a prediction, colleagues, as it is a fear, that you'll be able to react to it, and I trust that you will. Addressing prescription drug costs is important, and having experts tell us as electeds what's reasonable and what's not, I think is important. I listen to the other boards and commissions. The minority leader hates me enough to put me on most of the task forces that do exactly that. I care enough to be on those. So I'd have you consider this as you're talking to your colleagues in the House. I'm guessing the conversation is going to come up again. It's a reasonable step in the right direction without putting your constituents at risk. And Mr. President, and to all of you, I appreciate you at least entertaining the topic.
Further conversation. Senator Lundin.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. To the bill sponsors, deference and appreciate the effort. The conversation yesterday was extensive, beneficial. I think that the prior speaker gave an a very clear elucidation of the reasons why the bill doesn't get us where we want to go or need to go. What I tried to do in the conversation yesterday, and I will do again now, is try and make this about the people, the patients that I think this will negatively impact. And to do so, I'm going to walk through some of the drugs that are likely to be pushed out of the state by virtue of this nature. You know, a hospital purchasing group would be required to go to a wholesaler and say, I know the price for this particular drug sounds exorbitant, $311,000 a year, for instance, but all we can pay you, based on what is now established for us by an apparatus of government, is $85,000. And the drug maker then has the choice to either sell at a loss, potentially across the entire nation and around the globe by virtue of what happens because of this board and this bill, or they say, sorry, not available in Colorado. So the people that I would like you to think about are the people you know who may suffer from these conditions that are treated well by some of these drugs that will be pushed out of the state. Trikafta, cystic fibrosis. People you know who may be suffering cystic fibrosis and will lose a potentially beneficial pharmacological product from this state. People you know that have spinal muscular atrophy, Zolgensma. People that you know that have Hutchinson-Gilford progeria syndrome, so Kilvna. And I'm going to mess up all these names because I'm not a pharmacist. And you know how hard it is to read those scripts from the physicians, those signatures. The language of the drugs are equally difficult to read. Pediatric and adult neuroblastoma in the bone or bone marrow. Think about people you know that have perhaps that condition. Vision loss, even complete blindness, luxdema. Specific forms of Blatten disease called late infantile neuronal ceroid lipofuscin type 2. If you know somebody, you would know what that means. I can't even read it properly. I don't know anyone with that condition, but this bill would potentially impede their access to the drug. Takhzyro, that treats patients 12 years and older with type 1 and 2 hereditary angioedema. Patients that you know who may have HIV-1 and the drug Rukobia, potentially removed from the state by virtue of this. Neurofibromomastosis type 1. Advanced prostate cancer. Here's a prescient one, current drug, a drug that treats COVID-19. Vekluria, which is also known as remdesivir. Gavaredo, non-small cell lung cancer. Know anybody who's suffering from non-small cell lung cancer? Muscular dystrophy, Vitespro. Multiple myeloma, another HIV drug, Rukobia. A diagnostic for Alzheimer's disease, Tauvid. Retevmo, which treats lung cancer and thyroid cancers. Tabrecta, again, a drug that would treat non-small cell lung cancer. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the list goes on. And of course, the board, in its wisdom and expertise and judgment, will step potentially in the way between an individual and the life-saving, life-giving drug that we will, by virtue of this bill, choose to push out of the state. This list, as I said, goes on. The effect of the bill, I would argue, certain drug scarcity, a certainty of drug scarcity. But certainly, you cannot say that it wouldn't create the risk of drug scarcity, which might be detrimental to the people of Colorado. Just an effort, folks, to try and make this real. Think about some of those people that you may know, people who are fighting cystic fibrosis or spinal muscular atrophy, and the drugs that may not be available to them by virtue of this bill and the board that it creates. Mr. President, thank you for your attention.
Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I very much appreciate the comments of the senator from Monument, because that is where I am with this bill as well. I understand we have a problem, and the problem is that we have prescription drugs that are unaffordable. That's a problem, and I think every single person in this chamber wants to solve that problem. Unfortunately, there is no silver bullet to solve this problem because it's a complicated problem. There were efforts that were made that have failed to try and address the unintended possible consequences of passing this policy. And it's unfortunate because I don't pretend to think that this bill is going to solve all the problems. I think it will help. I think it'll make a stab in the right direction. But if we're going to make this leap of faith in this direction, then why would we not also then try to plan for the possibility that it doesn't do what it's supposed to do? Why would we not try to create opportunities to just have another look, elevate the conversation to the level where we could have another opportunity to vet it before we commit to it? Why would we not do that? Along the same lines as the senator from Monument, I have constituents in my community that have come to me and have asked me to pass bills on their behalf, and I have. And one of those constituents was Gracie, who has a rare disease. And we passed Gracie's bill down here at the legislature, unanimously, by the way. And we passed that bill because we recognized that sometimes children and families need our help, that there are unintended consequences to the policies that we enact down here. And if there's an opportunity to address them, then why wouldn't we? So, this is an email that I received that I just cannot reconcile at this moment with where this bill is. It comes from a woman named Becky. She's the mother of a child who is living with a rare disease. And she writes and she says, "Please hear my story. Listen to my concerns because I think they're valid." She says that as the mother of a child with an ultra-rare disease, especially the part of this bill that allows the board to set that upper pay limit on some prescription drugs, concerns me. My daughter is 8 years old, and she has this disease that I can't even begin to pronounce, which is a congenital metabolic bone disease impacting almost every system of her body. And she is among the fortunate few in that there is a medication for her disease. And this medication that she takes is obviously very expensive, but it is life-saving. She adopted her daughter from China. And by June of the year that they adopted her, in 2014, they had her diagnosis, which was an uncommon occurrence in a rare disease space where a diagnosis can often take years. And they were able to diagnose hers pretty quickly. Her daughter was 21 months old when they learned of her condition, and she could not walk, she couldn't stand, she was missing several teeth, she was in considerable pain, and this is a child who suffers from GI upsets and migraines. She's had 6 surgeries to improve her health and her mobility, and she's currently recovering from her 6th surgery. Now, she has the benefit of taking this revolutionary drug to treat her condition. That in itself is a miracle, quite frankly. And this drug was only launched in 2015, but within a few weeks of beginning the treatment, her daughter's pain was reduced. She started gaining strength, and she said our daughter actually laughed for the first time since her adoption of 3.5 years. And over the course of the last 5 years of being with her, her teeth have stopped loosening until it was the appropriate time to lose her first tooth. She hasn't thrown up at school. She hasn't had the migraines that had her sent home from playdates. And the surgeries that she's had have been almost all on her bones instead of related causes. And without this drug, none of that would have happened. This mother's concern is that with this bill, it doesn't consider the uniqueness of the orphan drug market and its specific impacts that the upper payment limits might have on rare disease patients like her daughter. Now, I use the word might have. I'm not saying it will have. I'm not saying absolutely if we pass this policy, we are condemning this child not to have this life-saving drug. But there is the possibility. So much so that this mother decided to write to me and beg me to do something about it. Now, this mother doesn't know how many other patients take this drug, but she does know that the disease that it's treating is only about 1 in every 100,000 births. So, allowing a small board of individuals to put a price cap on orphan drugs with few guardrails could leave children like her children without their life-saving medications. Could. Not absolutely. I'm not saying that this bill is going to condemn this child to not have life-saving drugs, but it could. And so why would we not make every attempt to just vet it a little bit more? Why wouldn't we do that? While putting a price cap on these medications might seem like a good idea, it almost assuredly will increase out-of-pocket costs for families that are facing a rare disease, that would see an increase in doctor visits, that will see an increase in hospital stays, that will see unavoidable surgeries, and other medications that will try and mitigate the other symptoms that come with this disease. And theoretically, it is a possibility that the drug could just become unavailable entirely. So, this mother is concerned that the steps that we are taking today could actually discourage companies from conducting the research necessary to find more treatments for other types of diseases, because they cannot, will not be able to recoup their investment due to these price caps. Now, additionally, while making perhaps prescription drugs more accessible to patients, as this bill purports to do, which I believe that it does have the possibility of doing, I will grant that, there is nothing in this bill that ensures that these savings from this upper pay limit will actually be passed along to Coloradans. Because ultimately, the only savings that gets passed along here are the insurance companies. So I am not disparaging the goal of this legislation. I acknowledge that there is a problem to solve here, But this is not a silver bullet. And we passed on opportunities to just make sure that what we are doing is the right thing. That's it.
Would the good senator from Jefferson County like to be extended to your next 10 minutes?
No, thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Kirkmeyer is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd agree with my fellow senators that from Monument and from Jefferson County and from Douglas County, not Parker, that this should really be about the patient and where we get to. And yesterday there was a flurry of amendments and activity down here, and we were talking about the appeal process. We got down to that, okay, finally, when you really look at this, it says that the independent external review entity has to submit a determination to the carrier, to the individual requesting the review, and to the physician or other healthcare professional. On a regular review, they get 45 calendar days. If it was an expedited review, they have to do it within 72 hours. That's after they've received the request. In really reading through this legislation, reading through the law, before the request is actually considered received, this is what needs to occur. An individual may request an expedited external review involving a denial of coverage of a recommended or requested medical service that is experimental or investigational if the individual's treating physician certifies in writing that the recommended or requested healthcare service or treatment that is subject of the denial would be significantly less effective if not promptly initiated. They have to go through and find, the treating physician does, that the standard healthcare services or treatments have not been effective. Either they find that or that there's no available standard healthcare service or a treatment. But the physicians have to go through and put in writing, certify in writing, so that the external review committee can make a determination. Not only that, is read down into the law, after receiving a written request of an independent external review, the carrier has to notify the individual. Then they have to notify the independent external review in writing. And there's a whole bunch of information here that they have to submit as well. Then the individual requesting the external review, even if it's expedited, still has opportunity to respond to whatever the carrier said. Then all the information goes to the independent external review entity. So there's a lot that needs to occur here. And just looking through this, it's pretty convoluted. It just appears that the appeal process could be a lot more robust and actually ensure that within 72 hours of getting everything at the very beginning, I don't think it's going to happen within 72 hours, at least not when you read through the law here. There's no physically way that it can. So again, we've heard patients' costs are not going to go down, and there's a very real possibility that because there really is no robust appeal process, that patients won't receive the medications on time. So I'd hope as this bill moves forward into the other chamber that we actually look at the appeal process and develop a more robust appeal process that would meet the needs of the patients so that they do or have the ability to get the medications that they need in time.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Fields.
Thank you, Madam President. And I just want to thank the senators that was just up here from Weld County. We also had, Douglas County. And then I think we had for Monument. And when the senator from Monument was describing all the debilitating illnesses, I started to think about my own constituents that I know are struggling with those types of illnesses. And the drugs that they take are life-saving drugs. They need their medication. And we can't be playing around when people need to take their medication daily. And we have this process that's in place that may take 72 hours or whatever the process. It's just not right. It's just not the order of things. If you're sick, you need to have access to your meds on a daily basis. Now, if you look at the bill title, it sounds pretty good. It says that the bill creates a prescription drug affordability review board to collect prescription drug cost information for insurers and establishes caps on drug costs. Sounds good. And I have several bioscience drug manufacturers in my district. And I don't know what goes on as relates to researching and determining what the ultimate cost of a drug should be. But I can tell you that far too often, my constituents talk to me about having issues paying for their rent, their property taxes, making sure that their kids have access to a quality education, and they also talk about how they can't afford their drugs. Sometimes it could be as simple as something as insulin, where maybe they're having to cut their pill in half, or the unexpected increase of medication. And some people have limited resources. And so when I look at the bill, especially on page 17, $30,000 for a 12-month supply, many people that I represent can't afford that. $30,000, that's somebody's salary. So I can understand the disappointment of the Douglas County Senator when he mentioned that he was disappointed that his amendment wasn't allowed to be voted on. But we do have somewhat of a safeguard because we had another senator yesterday from Denver introduce an amendment that kind of provides some options. But that option is really, it's almost like a reaction. It's not something that would, it's an appeals process. So we get to kind of weigh in afterwards. The amendment that was not given the opportunity to vote on was something that would have been more proactive. I do have some issues with this bill, but I'm going to be a yes vote on this bill, and I just hope it just plays out the way it's intended to be, that we're really saving people expenses, costs, as it relates to prescription drugs. I think that's the intent of the bill, and I just hope that it's something that we can follow through with, but only time will tell.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam President. I do appreciate the amendments that were offered on second reading. There was a lot of dialogue, and always appreciate the expertise on this subject matter from my friend from Douglas County. I'm voting no on 175. This past year or more have been a great example for us to be grateful for the pharmaceutical industry. People have been demanding access to vaccines. They've seen family members, friends, business associates die from an unseen force. I mean, we can't see the virus. You don't know if it's right there, but they found in remarkable, I think, record time, not just 1, 2, but I understand 3 vaccines to help us move past COVID-19. We have heard praise. Thank you to the frontline professionals, the doctors, nurses, EMTs, the healthcare professionals that are taking care of people on the front lines of the COVID pandemic. But we've also heard praise for the pharmaceutical industry for doing something that science could do, and I sure can't. I don't know how to do that. I don't know many people who know how to do that. But as we hopefully come out of the pandemic, as we hopefully move on as a world from having to be worried about that virus, maybe there will be others, how quickly we forget the science in this country, the industry that made those remarkable vaccines available in such short order. I'm troubled by Senate Bill 175 that one or more pharmaceutical companies might say, it costs too much to do business in that state. We'll do business in other states, but we won't do business in that state. Oh, some might say that's far-fetched. They make pharmaceutical prescription drugs and everyone in this country, everyone in the world needs them. Well, we've heard discussion on different legislation that those companies charge too much, so we're going to buy drugs from different companies, or different countries. Oh, okay. But the notion that a pharmaceutical company might not bring a specific drug to Colorado, or might just completely leave Colorado, I understand the temptation to say, oh, that's far-fetched. That's just scare tactics. Hulbert's just trying to intimidate people and scare people into voting no. Oh, really? Well, it's far-fetched. If you think that's far-fetched, take a look at page 31 of the bill. That's where we find the requirement of a company, a prescription drug company, that dares to stop bringing a particular drug to this state. If they decide to do that, the bill recognizes that companies can do that. They have to give 180 days written notice, and it prescribes exactly to whom they have to give that written notice. So, far-fetched? No, it's in the bill. So, what lever is applied? $500,000. If you're not going to bring a particular drug to our state and the highest possible cost has been determined by the unelected board that's not accountable to us because the amendment wasn't considered. If a company says, not having anything to do with this, goodbye, the company has to provide written notice, and the people to whom it must be given, the commissioner, the attorney general, each entity in the state with which the manufacturer is contracted for the sale and distribution of the prescription drug. If you don't follow that rule right, that's a law, but if you don't do it right, you could pay up to $500,000. If you don't give 180 days notice properly, you pay $500,000. How's that going to reduce the cost of pharmaceutical drugs for people in Colorado? $500,000 penalty. How does that make it less expensive by making it more expensive? Maybe some supporters would say, well, we don't want them to pay the penalty. It's supposed to be big enough that they won't make that decision. Oh, really? That's called the cost of doing business. And it isn't just the price of the drugs. I mean, every expense on the expense side of the ledger factors into the price of the drug. But somehow we're those who support the bill, not we, not me, but those who support the bill apparently think that half, let me just make sure I get that right. Yeah. $500,000, $500,000, that's enough of a lever that the company would say, oh, we don't want that to happen. There's a book that I read a long time ago that some people look at as just pure fiction. And it just continues to prove itself true, that it isn't fiction. It is written as fiction. But it's a story about how government required the trains to run on time and the same number of trains to run, and the people running the trains had to charge the same price. And then the trains stopped running. The tracks weren't taken care of, and there were no more trains. And government steps in and says, nope, railway companies, we're going to punish you into making the same number of trains run on the same schedule and charging the same amounts. And then there were no more trains. Ironically, in that book, some of the heroes, some of the makers of wealth, some of the entrepreneurs escaped to a secret valley in Colorado. Now they'll be running from this state. To the pharmaceutical industry, thank you for the incredible work that you do. I'm sorry that our state is going to do this to you. To the parents who've contacted me and asked me to do anything I can to stop this bill. Yep, we tried. But I'm in the minority. I don't have enough votes to stop this bill. Ask for a no vote on Senate Bill 175.
Further discussion. Senator Hawkins Lewis.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Senate Bill 175 is why I ran for office. As the first pharmacist to be elected to the General Assembly, I did it because I wanted to do something about the high cost of prescription drugs and what it does to healthcare. The high cost of drugs is driving the premiums each year that we all have to pay to get health insurance. I just want to correct the record. Every drug that you heard listed earlier, those, almost every one of them, and I can speak to the other, are what are called orphan drugs. We specifically put an amendment in the bill yesterday to make sure that we protect orphan drugs. I don't have the amendment number, but if anyone wants to talk with me about it later, I'm happy to pull it up. Those drugs will not be reviewed by PDAB, and if they're reviewed, they will not be affected in access. We put that in the bill. The other drug is a lung cancer drug. As a pharmacist, I know each and every one of these drugs. There are some cancer drugs that have other choices. They're very similar. I'm not saying that drug. The board will be very, very careful and take into account many of the criteria before they take any action to affect access. That's not their intent. The intent is to lower the cost of the prescription drugs. So let's talk about cost. The average drug coming to market now is over $1,000 a month. No longer do we have the flat copays that were listed. Most plans now have coinsurance, In fact, if you're age 65 to 79, you're paying around $450 a month for that drug. It's on the Georgetown Health Policy website. You can look it up. We don't have those old-timey flat copays anymore. They're now co-insurance. People cannot afford their drugs, and you have to get through the annual deductible first. A family of 4 can have an average deductible of $10,000 a year. That means they pay $10,000 before their drug coverage kicks in. This is not tolerable. We have to do something about it. I wish that the pharmaceutical manufacturers would lower their prices. We have begged them to. We've begged them to for the last 10 to 20 years, but they haven't. We appreciate what the research that was done with COVID vaccine, but that had government money supporting it. It was government money and government programs that helped move that vaccine, and that vaccine is free. If there was a big cost on that vaccine, we'd be talking about that. This is our chance. This is why each and every one of us that talked about lowering the cost of healthcare and prescription drugs, this is the bill. This is the bill to do it. We can do it today, and I ask for your aye vote.
Any further discussion? Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Madam President, colleagues, people of Colorado. I awakened this morning and thought about this bill and thought I really might not talk about it. It's Friday. The vote is going to be what the vote is going to be. But it turned out that no one's in any particular hurry today. And there is something that is important to say about this bill, because this bill will have implications for Coloradans for years to come. And as the senator from Douglas County said, maybe it's in a good place, you'll be able to explain to your constituents. Now, I thank the sponsors for their intentions, their desire to deal with this incredible problem we have with the cost of prescription drugs in America. And they're high, $450 for those of you who are senior citizens. Wouldn't know myself. Well, I might. You know, I once heard a U.S. Congressman, I think it was Henry Hyde, speak at a political dinner, and he said he had been in Congress for quite some time at that point, and he said, you know, when I first got to Congress, no one much talked about health care. It wasn't a big issue. I mean, we did Medicare in 1965 and so forth, but it wasn't a huge issue. Now it's all that everybody talks about. And he said, you know why that is, in my view? I thought this was, very insightful. He said, when I first came to Congress, if someone had a heart attack, someone grabbed the phone, called the ambulance, they came. If the person was lucky, they were alive when the ambulance got there and they survived to the hospital, but chances are that was about that. And expensive, even in those days, an ambulance ride wasn't as expensive. Said, we live in a wonderful world now. That same person, someone will call the ambulance, They'll come and get them, that will have modern day treatment beyond anything that could have been imagined 50 years ago, will have really good chances of surviving, and if they get to the hospital, really good chances of surviving. I will spend tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars saving that senior citizen. And then they will go on drug therapies to allow them to extend their life and live a great and good quality life. It costs a lot. This bill seeks to deal with that cost because it's a very large cost. We buy a lot of health care in this country, and a lot of it is drug therapies. And it's largely, those costs are largely about economics, maybe all about economics. This bill seeks to, whether it's intended that way or not, the structure of it is to try to sidestep, bypass, avoid the economic realities of those drugs. I mean, we talked about orphan drugs. Orphan drugs are because not very many people use them, but they're miraculous. Drugs that a lot of people use, at least in theory, and if the market were perfect, it's not, but it become less and less expensive. And when the patent runs out on them, they really become less expensive. This bill sets up something of a command economy for drugs in Colorado. There is nothing that is more well-intentioned in its purest form than a command economy. Nothing. There's also nothing more disastrous for the people than a command economy. Think Soviet Russia, think North Korea, think Cuba. Why is that? Because, and time doesn't permit me, as well as the setting, to draw pictures on a whiteboard and start with the basic economic realities of these things. Do drug companies make too much money? I don't know. I'm not a shareholder in pharmaceuticals unless, of course, one of my pension funds happens to be, and I don't control whether people are in or out. But the reason we have miraculous drug therapies is because people invest, and there's research and development, and it's all incredibly expensive, and those companies try to recoup. And yes, they're shareholders, they're investors. They're sort of neutral about all of this. They can put their money there, they can put their money there. That money will go wherever it gets the best return on investment based upon risk. And so pharmaceuticals have high risk, high return when they're successful, and a big research and development tail to keep making those kinds of returns, some of which are lost completely. So that, in a nutshell, is why drugs cost a lot. We grant them patent protection, at least I thought we did until yesterday. We grant them patent protection to encourage them to make those kinds of large investments. Now, this is all about the bill and background. Let me turn to the specifics of the bill. As the senator from Douglas County pointed out, we're some small percentage of the drug market. And there's a price out there. It's a price for drug therapies that the producers want and ask for, and they get pressure from Medicare and Medicaid and a lot of negotiation, large purchasers, and, by the way, insurance carriers. Now, we do a lot of things to insurance carriers, you know? And again, I'm not invested in them particularly either. We do a lot of things to them. For instance, they start looking at high-cost drugs and saying, well, is there something that does as well or nearly as well that costs a whole lot less? Because we're trying to hold costs low. There's two reasons for that. They're not bad reasons, they're economic reasons. One is our consumers, we want to keep their policy low. And two, by doing so, it allows us to make a profit because they have investors as well. Investors aren't bad people, they're you and me, they may be your retirement fund. I hope they are. What are we going to do with this bill? Well, we're going to have a command economy. We're going to set the upper price limit for drugs. You say, well, okay, so they'll just have to take that price. They're in that business and they'll have to take it. Well, no, they won't.
Senator, would you like to proceed into your next 10 minutes?
Thank you. I'd like to continue.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. So, I'd probably feel better if I thought that the supporters of this bill had the courage of their convictions. What do I mean by that? Well, if I felt that they really, really believed in their heart of hearts that you can set these prices and it's going to work and the pharmaceutical companies are going to provide these drug therapies anyway. But they don't. I'll tell you why I know they don't. Because yesterday there was an amendment, or in appropriations there was an amendment that said, notwithstanding any provision to the contrary, in a state agency that's required to purchase or reimburse a payer for a prescription drug is not going to be subject to the penalties, really not going to be subject to the regime of the command economy. Now, why would you do that? Why would you do that? And after all, if this is going to work, it's going to work. And the state ought not be paying more than for the drugs than the rest of us. Why would we voluntarily do that? Well, I don't think we're voluntarily doing that here. What that is a tacit admission that if you set the price artificially low, companies are not going to provide expensive drug therapies for less than they cost. They're just not going to do it. So there was concern. I mean, it's an interesting thing. There was concern in committee because the Department of Corrections has an obligation to provide things like expensive hepatitis C drug therapies. You know, the Department of Corrections didn't want to do that. They had to be, and not because they're callous or anything, it's incredibly expensive. Although I might say that is a government agency, just like the government agency being created by this bill. Government is going to do what government does. And if you're really convinced that you can set this price and the pharmaceutical companies, pharma is going to provide it anyway, then by golly, we ought not be paying them more for the Department of Corrections inmates, paying more for them than carriers have to pay for policyholders. If we had the courage of our convictions in voting for this bill, those who do, then you wouldn't need that provision because you'd say, they're going to provide it anyway. No, they're not. That provision is a tacit admission that there's concern about it at the very least. We're going to end up with a situation where those who might receive very expensive drug therapies are not going to have them at all. And when your constituents say to you and call you on the phone, as they should, I can't get this for my son, my daughter, my father, my husband, my wife, I can't get it in Colorado because I've got this Colorado regulated policy and they can't pay more than this, and the provider, the manufacturer can't sell it for more than that. That transaction is now no longer a legal transaction. Can't get it. There is nothing more well-intentioned than a command economy, and there is nothing more destructive than a command economy. And what this does is create a command economy for drugs in Colorado, except of course, for DOC inmates. We're going to sentence our constituents out there on the street to fight to try to get drug therapies that companies will not be willing to provide, while the Department of Corrections will be able to get that. Explain that to your constituents. Explain that to them. I will help you. I ask for a no vote.
Senator Cook.
Thank you, Madam President. I too appreciate the efforts of the bill sponsors on this, because I think we all realize healthcare costs are spiraling out of control and we need to do something, but I'm not sure this is the right something. The good senator from Monument listed a lot of diseases and the drugs that help with those diseases. One of them hit home particularly hard. He mentioned, I can't remember what the drug is, but he mentioned cystic fibrosis. And that hit home to me because I had two cousins that were very close to me that died of cystic fibrosis. One at age 6, one at age 10. Back then, the life expectancy for a person with cystic fibrosis was about 15 years. Most of them didn't even live to 15. Now, because of these drugs, the average life expectancy is 44 to 45 years. So in just a few short years, life expectancy is increased by 30 years for people with that horrible, horrendous disease of cystic fibrosis. And the reason, for the most part, is because of the drugs and the research that these pharmaceutical companies have been doing to bring those drugs to market. I guess I fear that those drugs would not be available here in Colorado when this bill passes. And if my cousins were alive today, living here in Colorado, they might not make it to age 44 or 45 because those drugs wouldn't be available. They would have to either move to a state where they could get the drugs or suffer the consequences. If they were alive today, one would have lived an additional 34 years, the other additional 38 years. And I wasn't going to come down because I heard one of the bill sponsors talk about orphan drugs. And I thought, okay, I think maybe what she was talking about was an orphan drug that would have saved my cousins' lives back then. So I looked for the amendment. And I found it, I think. But orphan drugs aren't protected universally. They're not excluded, if I'm reading this amendment right. Because on page 19, the orphan drug amendment is actually on 20, but it starts on 19. And it says, after identifying prescription drugs as described in subsection 1 of this section, the board shall determine whether to conduct an affordability review for each identified prescription drug by, and then they list several factors. Then number 4 on page 19, in performing an affordability review, to the extent practical, the board shall consider, and they list a whole bunch of conditions that they should consider, until you get to one of the amendments. One of the things to consider, the impact on safety net providers, and the prescription drug is available through section 34 or 340B of the Federal Public Health Service Act, yada yada. And then number G, orphan drug status. So they're not protected. They're not automatically going to be available. This board, this unelected board, still has to review and decide whether or not to provide the drugs or to set a cost on these drugs. So these orphan drugs could be gone. They might not be available to our children here in Colorado. Let's not have what happened to my 2 cousins happen to any other 8 and 10-year-old in this state because the drugs weren't available to them. Thank you, Madam President. I'd ask for a no vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Teeny bit of redirect and a little bit of summary. So I came up earlier and I read off a list, part of a list. I read about a third of a very long list that's about conditions like cystic fibrosis, pediatric, that's child, neuroblastoma, HIV. That list is a list of conditions, but there are people behind all of that. This is about the orphan drug or the novel drug concept. You heard that that's been dealt with by amendment. The reality is the amendment simply says the board, which will in its infinite wisdom, as if it were in the middle of a patient-doctor relationship, make determinations to consider. Here's what it has to consider. The wholesale acquisition cost of the prescription drug, the cost and availability of therapeutic alternatives to the prescription drug in the state. That sounds really good, doesn't it? Alternatives. The reality is, trying to drive this down to a very human level. A precious child's life, a precious spouse's life. When it comes down to that person in your life who may be saved by a drug that's no longer going to be available in Colorado, is an alternative adequate, or do you need something that's the equivalent, or better yet, the only thing that is available to do that which you need for your family member? Alternative, I'm afraid that probably won't cut the mustard. And the amendment demands nothing more than the board consider. Are there alternatives? It doesn't say, is that incredibly valuable, incredibly expensive, incredibly important, incredibly life-saving drug, which may be the only thing, no, it is the only thing that can save that person's life in Colorado or not, available. Bill says, push it out. Now, I'm not going to get into the big economic effects of what this does to us as health care providing people across our nation by virtue of the domino effect this potentially has. I'm just going to say this about the people of Colorado because those are the folks we represent. Now, you heard that the motivation of the bill is driven by the fact that we begged the pharmaceutical industry just to drive their prices, just lower the prices. Well, since begging didn't work, and you know why begging didn't work? It's not that they're ill-intended. It takes a lot of research and smart people who get paid big wages. I mean, those PhDs don't work for free to figure out how do we push back the frontier of science in a way that will save human lives. Heck, you don't want me doing that. I can hardly string 5 words together in the well of a state senate. You want smart people who need wages and have proven the benefit of years and years of research and work to develop that idea that pushes back the frontier of science. It's the needed innovation to get to that miracle drug that gives someone cystic fibrosis or HIV or pediatric neuroblastoma a new lease on another day of life. So begging doesn't change the economics of it. It costs what it costs to do these amazing things that they are able to do on behalf of our children and our grandchildren and the future of our society and people today. So what do? When begging doesn't change the realities, we command. Because we got this process called politics. And we can use the coercive power of government to say to someone, you know what, whether you like it or not, we want you to fix this. We command that you lower the price. And the economic result of that is that which you are seeking evaporates. It disappears. It goes away. And the consequence of that is that person with cystic fibrosis doesn't get the drug they need. That child with neuroblastoma doesn't get the drug they need. That patient with HIV doesn't get the drug they need. So the idea that we've amended this to solve this miraculous drug, this orphan drug, this novel therapy problem is misguided. All it says to the board is consider, and it's about considering things that are about the public health apparatus. It's about trying to change things maybe across the broad spectrum and force prices down a little bit. But it's not about protecting the health of that individual. That person you may know with cystic fibrosis or HIV that needs not an alternative, not even an equivalent. They need the real deal. And this drug wants to drive the real deal out of the state. Colleagues, this is big stuff, and we deal with a lot of big stuff, and it's not easy, and I sincerely do appreciate the effort to get at this. I just have to stand here and say, it is my considered opinion, a student of economics, and a person who likes to think the most important thing we do in our lives is interact and relate with other people, that this isn't the right nexus. This doesn't get us where we need to go. This is going to have negative effects that we do not intend. Colleagues, I urge your opposition to 175. Thank you, Mr. President.
Having no further discussion, the motion before the body is the passage of Senate Bill 175 on third reading and final passage. Are there any no votes? Senators Quorum, Scott, Lundeen, Gardner, Simpson, Cook, Woodward, Smallwood, Kirkmeyer, Rankin, Sonnenberg, Liston, Heisey, the Minority Leader, Priola, Zenzinger. With 19 aye votes, 16 no votes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, Senate Bill 175 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Bridges, Reno, General orders. Second reading of bills. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Bill 1121 lay over until May 14th.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted, and House Bill 1121 will lay over until 5/14/21 and retain its place on the calendar. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 137 lay over until May 10th.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted, and Senate Bill 137 will lay over until 5/10/21 and retain its place on the calendar. Committee reports.
Have that on. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the Merits Committee recommends the following: Senate Bill 87 be amended as also amended before the committee whole favorable recommendation. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the Merits Committee recommends the following: Senate Bill 88 be amended as also amended before the committee whole favorable recommendation. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the Merits Committee recommends the following: House Bill 1084 be before the committee whole favorable recommendation. Recommendation be placed on the consent calendar. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the Merits Committee recommends the following: House Bill 1116 before the committee whole favorable recommendation. Recommendation be placed on the consent calendar. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the Merits Committee recommends the following: House Bill 1122 before the committee of the whole with favorable recommendation. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the Merits Committee recommends the following: Senate Bill 9 be amended as follows, so amended before the committee of the whole favorable recommendation. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the Merits Committee recommends the following: Senate Bill 25 be amended as follows, so amended before the committee of the whole favorable recommendation. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the Merits Committee recommends the following: Senate Bill 57 before the committee of the whole favorable recommendation. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the Merits Committee recommends the following: Senate Bill 76 be amended as follows, so amended before the committee of the whole favorable recommendation. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the Merits Committee recommends the following: Senate Bill 91 be before the committee of the whole favorable recommendation. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the Merits Committee recommends the following: Senate Bill 129 be amended as follows, so amended before the committee of the whole favorable recommendation. Recommendation placed on the consent calendar. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the Merits Committee recommends the following: Senate Bill 131 be amended as follows, so amended before the committee of the whole favorable recommendation. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the Merits Committee recommends the following: Senate Bill 138 be amended as follows, so amended before the committee of the whole favorable recommendation. Recommendation placed on the consent calendar. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the Merits Committee recommends the following: Senate Bill 154 be amended as follows, so amended before the committee of the whole favorable recommendation. Recommendation placed on the consent calendar. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the Merits Committee recommends the following: Senate Bill 156 be amended as follows, so amended before the committee of the whole favorable recommendation. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the Merits Committee recommends the following: Senate Bill 193 be amended as follows, so amended before the committee of the whole favorable recommendation. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the Merits Committee recommends the following: Senate Bill 194 be amended as follows, so amended before the committee of the whole with favorable recommendation. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the Merits Committee recommends the following: Senate Bill 236 be amended as follows, so amended before the committee of the whole with favorable recommendation. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the committee recommends the following: Senate Bill 238 be amended as follows, so amended before the committee of the whole with favorable recommendation. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the Merits Committee recommends the following: Senate Bill 239 be amended as follows, so amended before the committee of the whole with favorable recommendation. Recommendation placed on the consent calendar. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the Merits Committee recommends the following: Senate Bill 246 before the committee of the whole with favorable recommendation. May 7th, Committee on Appropriations. After consideration, the Merits Committee recommends the following: Senate Bill 250 be amended as follows, so amended before the committee of the whole with favorable recommendation.
Message from the House.
May 7th, Mr. President, the Speaker has appointed Representative Weissman, Chair Larson, and Woodrow as House conferees as the first conference committee on Senate Bill 17.
Message from the Governor.
Executive order. Members, Parks and Wildlife Commission order that the following named person be and they are hereby appointed and reappointed to the Parks and Wildlife Commission for terms expiring July 1st, 2022. Luke B. Schaefer of Craig, Colorado, who was previously appointed to serve as a member at large, to now serve as a member at large and as a resident living west of Continental Divide. Carrie Bessnet Hauser, Glenwood Springs, Colorado, who was previously reappointed to serve as a representative of outdoor recreation utilization of parks, resource, agriculture, to now serve as a representative of outdoor recreation utilization of parks, resource, agriculture, and as a resident living west of Continental Divide. For terms expiring July 1st, 2024, Duke Phillips IV of Colorado Springs, Colorado, as representative of agriculture, appointed James J. Tuckton of Hasty, Colorado, as a representative of a non-profit organization that promotes conservation, recognized non-consumptive wildlife use, appointed. Dallas Laverne May of Lamar, Colorado, as a representative of agriculture, appointed. Given under my hand an executive seal, Jared Poles, Governor.
Delivery to the governor. Excuse me, message from the governor, Agriculture and Natural Resources. Delivery to the governor.
May 6th, to the governor for signature on Tuesday, May 6th at 3:30 p.m. Senate Bills 59, 135, 160, 178, 198.
Signing of bills.
May 7th, the President signed Senate Bill 205.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate take up House Bills 1084 and 1116 and Senate Bills 129, 138, 154, and 239 on special orders consent calendar at the hour of 12:07 p.m.
The motion is that the Senate take up those bills listed on the special orders consent calendar at the hour of 12:07. This requires a two-thirds majority vote. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and those bills listed will make up the special orders consent calendar at the hour of 12:07. Special orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar. Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of Whole for the consideration of special orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. The Senate resolve itself into the Committee of Whole for consideration of special orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar, and Senator Zenzinger will take the chair.
The committee will come to order and the court rule is relaxed. Majority Leader Fenberg. Will the clerk please read the title to all the bills on second order, second reading of bills consent calendar?
House Bill 1084 by Representative Exum Van Winkle and Senator Heisey concerning the ability of certain individuals in custody of the State Department of Human Services to acquire legal authority to derive and in connection with making an appropriation. House Bill 1116 by Representative Holtorf and Ortiz and Senators Liston and Garcia concerning access to state parks by Purple Heart recipients. Senate Bill 129 by Senator Garcia and Representative Ortiz concerning establishing a pilot program to reduce the suicide rate among veterans. Senate Bill 138 by Senators Coleman and Representative Sanders concerning measures to improve the support of persons in the criminal justice system with a brain injury. Senate Bill 154 by Senators Coker and Simpson, Representative Cutter and Soper concerning the implementation of the 988 National Suicide Prevention Lifeline Network in Colorado. Senate Bill 239 by Senators Coker and Zenzinger and Representatives Mvali and Van Bibber concerning the statewide communication system for renewal to behavioral health service and in connection with making an appropriation.
Majority Leader Fenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move for the adoption of all the bills on the consent calendar and their associated committee reports, which includes House Bills 1084 and 1116, and Senate Bills 129, along with the State Veterans Military Affairs Committee report and the Appropriations Committee report. Senate Bill 138, along with the Judiciary Committee report and the Appropriations Committee report. Senate Bill 154, along with the Health and Human Services Committee report and the Finance Committee report and the Appropriations Committee report. And Senate Bill 239, along with the Health and Human Services Committee report and the Appropriations Committee report.
Is there any discussion on any of the committee reports on special order, second reading of bills consent calendar? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the committee reports are adopted. Is there any discussion on any of the bills on consent calendar? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of all the bills on the consent calendar, special order, second reading. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bills are adopted. Majority Leader Fenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Move the committee rise and report.
The motion before the body is to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the committee will rise and report.
The Senate will come to order. Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has met and had a number of bills under consideration. Will the clerk please read the report?
Mr. President, your committee of the whole begs leave to report has had under consideration the following bills, being the second reading thereof, and makes the following recommendations thereon. Senate Bill 129 as amended, 138 as amended, 154 as amended, 239 as amended, House Bills 1084 and 1116 passed on second reading, reordered, revised, and placed on the calendar for third reading, final passage.
Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of the report.
The motion is for the adoption of the committee of the whole report. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, the committee of the whole report is adopted. Senate Bill 129 is amended. Senate Bill 138 is amended. Senate Bill 154 is amended. Senate Bill 239 is amended. Passed on second reading, ordered, engrossed, and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bill 1084, House Bill 1116, passed on second reading, ordered, revised, and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Members, will the Capitol Choir please convene so that we may wish and sing a happy birthday to Senator Winter? Today is her birthday.
I think we ought to sing it regular and then do CD. Okay. Yeah.
That is called.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Winter. Happy birthday to you. We're going to do it? We're going to do it? Okay. Where's James? Where's James? Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday. Yes.
Announcements. The Senate will stand in a brief recess. The Senate will come back to order. Introduction of bills.
Senate Bill 266 by Senator Gardner and Lee and Representative Weissman and Soper concerning the non-substantive revision of statutes and Colorado Revised statutes as amended in connection therewith amending or repealing obsolete, imperfect, and inoperative law to preserve the legislative intent, effect, and meaning of the law.
Judiciary.
Senate Bill 267 by Senator Hansen, Representative Herod, concerning the extension of the Office of Public Guardianship.
Appropriations. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate adjourn until 10 a.m. on Monday, May 10th.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. And the Senate will stand in adjournment until 1000 hours on 5/10/21.